Most people don't realize the moment their life stops feeling normal. It's never loud. It's never obvious. It's just one small thing, slightly out of place. And by the time you notice it, it might already be too late. That being said, let's get into some unsettling, horrifying threads which are actually insane. There's a man living in my walls. He smiles at me when I sleep. Originally posted to r/no sleep. The post reads as follows. I never wanted to move back into my childhood home. It wasn't just the bad memories. There was something off about the house itself. My mom used to say it was just old and creaky, but I remember the way the shadows never seemed to fall right. How certain rooms always felt colder, no matter how high we turned up the heat. And then there was the scratching noise in the walls. Probably mice, my mom used to say. But mice don't laugh. When my mom passed away last year, I had no choice but to come back. It was cheaper than renting, and I thought maybe, as an adult, the house wouldn't scare me anymore. I was wrong. The first night back, I barely slept. The house was so quiet, I could hear every groan of the wood, every whisper of wind sneaking through the gaps in the windows. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, that nothing had changed in the house since I'd been a kid. But then, at around 2 a.m., I heard the scratching. It started faintly, like fingernails running along the inside of the walls. Then it grew louder, more frantic. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Just mice, I whispered to myself, repeating it like a prayer. The scratching stopped. I let out a shaky breath and was just starting to relax when I heard the laugh. It was faint, barely audible, but I know what I heard. A low, wheezing chuckle that made my stomach twist into knots. I didn't sleep at all after that. For the next week, the noises got worse. The scratching grew louder and more constant. Sometimes I'd hear the laugh again, soft and raspy, always coming from the walls. I tried telling myself it was just the house settling, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. One night, I got brave enough to investigate. I followed the sound of the scratching to the living room, pressing my ear against the wall. I could hear breathing. By the end of the second week, I was losing it. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like I was being watched. I started hearing faint whispers, too low to make out, but just loud enough to keep me awake. I decided to rip open the walls. It wasn't easy. The house was old, and the plaster crumbled as I hacked at it with a crowbar. I made a mess, but I didn't care. I just wanted to prove to myself that there was nothing there. But I found something. Inside the wall, hidden between the wooden beams, was a tiny opening, a crawl space. The crawl space was barely big enough for a person, but there was stuff inside. Old blankets, a rusted flashlight, wrappers from snacks I didn't recognize. Someone had been living there. I felt sick as I reached for the flashlight. I didn't want to shine it inside, but I couldn't stop myself. The light illuminated a small figure crouched in the back corner. It was a man. He was pale and thin, his clothes tattered and dirty. His head tilted at an odd angle as he stared at me with wide, unblinking eyes. His lips stretched into a smile that was far too wide for his face. And then he laughed. The same low, wheezing chuckle I'd been hearing for weeks. I screamed, stumbling backward, but when I looked again, the crawl space was empty. I boarded up the wall that night. I told myself it was over, that whoever, or whatever, I'd seen was gone. But deep down, I knew better. Now, every night, I hear him, the scratching, the laughter. And when I wake up, I see him standing at the foot of my bed, his too wide smile glowing in the darkness. Sometimes the scariest part isn't what we see. It's realizing how long something has been there without us noticing. Houses remember things, and sometimes they don't forget who used to live inside them. If you've ever had that feeling, like you weren't completely alone in a place you should have been safe, you're not the only one. Sleep well tonight, and listen carefully to your walls. My sleep app recorded something in my room last night, originally posted to r/nosleep. The post reads as follows: I'm not the best writer, so you'll have to forgive me. I've always had problems with sleepwalking. This is extended, unfortunately, into adulthood. I have many stories from family members, friends, and roommates about the things I've said and done while asleep. Eventually, I decided I didn't want to just hear about it, so I set up an app on my phone, which records me if I say anything while I sleep. Most of the things I say aren't words and are more like moans and screams, but I don't think whatever was recorded on the app last night was me. I recently went back to college after the summer holidays. Unfortunately, I forgot my cell phone charger and a few other things at home. I was able to charge my cell phone by leeching off of my friend's iPhone chargers, but I decided to drive an hour back to my house to get it and stay the weekend with my parents. My mom and I got into a big fight before I left for home. She was yelling at me for being irresponsible and telling me that I should have packed more carefully and not just waited until the day before. That might be why I came back to such a chilly reception. The house was cold and smelled musty, and my mom and dad didn't come to hug and greet me like they usually do. It's become such a habit to plug in my phone and start up the sleep app, so I was confused when I couldn't find my phone in my bag. It turns out it was in my bedroom, plugged into the charger, with a huge crack across the screen. My mom probably decided to plug it into the charger, dropped and broke it, and didn't want to face me. I was mad, but it was late, and the phone still worked, so I just turned on the app and went to sleep. Now that I think about it, maybe something else plugged in my phone. I was surprised when I woke up today. I saw how noisy I had been that night. I clicked on a few of the things I said that night. While the voice sounded like me, there was also a very deep, echoey voice in the background. Think of the little sisters in BioShock. I've transcribed the things I said and the approximate times I said them, since the app isn't very precise and will not allow me to save files to show you unless I pay for it. At approximately 2 a.m., moaning and crying. This is very normal for me. It's usually a little later that I actually start talking. But the crying sounds like actual pain and stress, rather than my sleep crying, which almost sounds fake when you hear it. At approximately 2:30 a.m., more crying. One word, repeated, slurred, and kind of wet sounding. Help. Still that echoing in the background, much deeper than my own voice, like something else standing in the room next to me. At approximately 3:45 a.m., I asked, "Can anybody hear me?" Hurt. There's more muttering and more crying. I can't really understand it. At approximately 4:15 a.m., I shouted, "Mommy! Mommy! Mommy!" These are actually screams, with the echoing voice screaming as well. I have no idea how she didn't come. These are very, very loud, the loudest I've ever heard myself scream when still sleeping. At approximately 5 a.m., "Mommy!" loud crying. "Please, I'm scared." I'm operating on the assumption that this is me, but I guess it could not be me. I think that this may have been something trying to lure my mother into the room. I don't know why it didn't work. At approximately 5:15 a.m., I heard sound of loud screeching, like metal scraping against something else. Maybe the echoey thing screaming, no more words, more crying in the background, until it got quieter and quieter, and then it went away. I think the app couldn't hear it anymore. I think I'll talk to my parents and see if they heard me screaming last night. I haven't talked to them or seen them all day. I think they are out of the house. I hope my mom's not too mad and will cooperate. I'll keep you posted, Reddit. Update. I didn't hear from my parents all day. The house is empty and get very, very cold at night. My phone disappeared yesterday for several hours, but reappeared at a charger in the kitchen before I went to bed last night. I can only work the app. I cannot buy anything. My computer also seems to be stuck on Chrome, and specifically on the websites I had open before I packed it up to leave. I turned on the app when I slept last night, but it recorded nothing. I can hear moving around in the rooms, like footsteps. I don't know what's going on. Now, let's have a look at some of the comments. The first one reads as follows. This might seem a little weird, but if you don't mind me asking, what's your name? And what date is it, as far as you know? The next one says, having woken up from terrifying dreams mid-sob-fest, this almost makes me want to hear what goes on in my sleep. Minus terrifying echo thing, though, and the whole parents not talking to you thing. Let's read some more. A few years back, Lorraine Warren, the famous ghost hunter lady, and also a character in the movie The Conjuring, came to lecture at my university. She said when it gets abnormally cold like that, it is a spirit coming into our world of the living. Do some research on her, be careful, and keep us updated. Stay safe, another one said. Yeah, I think you need to be worried about your parents. Let's read one last comment. I wonder if it was you screaming those things, seeing as how you only received negativity from your mother, and your subconscious self wanted a more motherly affection. And that's why you screamed for her to help you, so she could comfort you and give you what mothers should give their children. It's an assumption, as I'm really hoping it's not a ghost or demon, but I have a feeling that it is. Try and find your parents to see what's going on. I'm worried something happened. Stories like this get shared online all the time. Recordings, logs, evidence people wish they never checked. Maybe it's stress, maybe it's sleepwalking, or maybe, sometimes, something else knows exactly when we're most vulnerable. If you've ever experienced something you couldn't explain, you're not the only one who's heard something in the dark. The elevator at work took me to a floor that doesn't exist. Originally posted to r/nosleep. The post reads as follows. I'm not sure as posting this will even work. There's no signal in here, but it's worth a shot. I work a hospital in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been here for about 3 months now, and I've gotten to know the hospital pretty well due to the fact that we provide a delivery service to patients up in rooms. I'm usually the one who volunteers to do the deliveries because wandering around is far more entertaining than having to show people where the chapstick is. Anyway, I received a delivery about an hour ago for a floral bouquet and some balloons to be delivered to a patient up in the 8th floor of the hospital. When my coworker arrived for her shift about half an hour ago, I went off to deliver the stuff. But the elevator wouldn't let me off on the 8th floor. I walked in, pressed the button to the 8th floor, and the doors were shut, followed by the automated voice that said, "Going up." I watched as the number increased on the little screen above the door. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. When it reached the 8th floor, the elevator stopped moving, but the doors didn't open. I pushed the button a few times, but nothing happened, so I tried to push the button to the 1st floor. Going down. I waited for the elevator to reach the 1st floor, but the same thing happened. Once it got there, it just stopped, and the door didn't open. I pressed the button for the 2nd floor. Going up. The elevator rose, but again, the doors remained shut. I was starting to freak out a bit now, so I pressed the alarm. Going down! The elevator went down the 1st floor, but didn't stop there. This time, it went all the way down to the basement of the hospital, where the library and the loading dock were. It stopped, but the doors didn't open. I pressed the button for the alarm again. Going down. I froze. Down? I was on the lowest level of the building. There was nothing below the basement. There wasn't even a button for anything below the basement, and yet the elevator was definitely moving down. I pressed the button to the 1st floor again. Going down. The elevator sped up, going down even faster now, and I held on to one of the bars to keep from falling down. Last stop. Thank you for choosing Banner Health. Again, the doors didn't open, but this time I could hear something outside. I pressed my ear to the elevator doors to listen. It sounded like footsteps, hundreds of them all at once. Then I realized they were also chanting something. It became louder and louder until I was finally able to make out what they were saying. Last stop, last stop, last stop, last stop. I then realized it was getting louder because they were getting closer. I backed away from the door. Last stop, last stop, last stop, last stop. I pressed every single button on the elevator, but it kept repeating the same thing. Last stop. Thank you for choosing Banner Health. Last stop. Thank you for choosing Banner Health. Last stop. Thank you for choosing Banner Health. Outside, the chanting grew. Last stop. Last stop. Last stop. It went on for what felt like hours, but it's only been about 15 minutes according to my phone. Suddenly, everything went silent. I can still feel that there is something behind the door. It's been quiet for a little bit now. The elevator just dinged. I was confused for a second, and then I realized what that meant. The doors were opening. Now, let's have a look at some of the comments. The first one reads as follows: low-key maze runner setting. The next one says, if anyone likes anime, this reminds me of Yami Shibai. It's a Japanese horror anime where the characters are animated in kind of still images, and each episode is only like 4 minutes long. They're short and sweet and creepy AF, another one said. Yeah, that's a common problem at Thunderbird Hospital. John C. Lincoln has the bleeding walls, though, so it all comes down to your insurance. The next one says, are you okay down there? Keep me updated so I know you're safe. There has to be a way back up. The hospital is going to need that elevator operational again sooner or later so people can see the patients. The next comment says, used to work for a Banner hospital in Arizona. Can confirm creepy places exist. Another one said, OP, say hi to Lucy for us, please. Cheers. Now let's read the last one. Well, great. I had just gotten over my fear of elevators. Places like hospitals never really sleep. Elevators run all night. Lights stay on. People come and go, constantly. And most of the time, we trust that when we press a button, we're going somewhere that exists. But if you've ever stepped into an elevator and felt that split second of hesitation, wondering if the doors would open somewhere they shouldn't. You're not the only one who's had that thought. Next time you hear an elevator ding, just make sure it's actually your floor. The strange thing about stories like these is how ordinary they always begin. A normal night, a normal place, a normal routine, and then something shifts, just slightly, just enough that you notice. Most people ignore that feeling, the feeling that something isn't quite right. But sometimes, the moment you notice it, something else notices you noticing it. And once that happens, it doesn't always stop watching. Sleep well tonight. And if something feels off, maybe trust that feeling.